After my diagnosis, my children divided my assets. So I established a trust they can't touch. I never thought the words stage 2 would change everything, not just my health, but how my own children would see me. One moment, I was Eleanor Johansson, respected mother of 2 successful children and grandmother to the most beautiful grandkids in Michigan. The next, I was a collection of assets to be divided, a burden to be managed, a problem to be solved. "Mom, you should sign these papers. It's for your own good," my son said, sliding documents across my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with science projects and celebrated his law school acceptance. Now he was telling me I couldn't be trusted with my own money, my own home. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. A retired teacher of 30 years doesn't fold that easily. What my children forgot was that I taught them everything. They know, but not everything I know. This is the story of how I fought back, reclaimed my dignity, and created a new life they never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1, The Revelation. The morning everything changed started. Like any other. I was tending to my hydrangeas, which had just started blooming in spectacular shades of blue and purple in my front garden. My garden had always been my pride and joy in our Lakewood neighborhood. The Tudor-style home, Richard, and I had purchased 30 years ago had the perfect soil for hydrangeas, and neighbors often stopped to compliment them. I'd been feeling unusually tired lately. At first, I brushed it off as just part of getting older. I was 65 after all. But the fatigue had become overwhelming, and I'd finally gone to see Dr. Marshall the previous week. I was waiting for results, trying not to worry. When my phone rang, I peeled off my gardening gloves and fished it from my pocket. Dr. Marshall himself was calling, not his nurse. My stomach knotted instantly. "Eleanor, I have your test results. I'd like you to come in today if possible." 2 hours later, I sat in his office as he said the words that would divide my life into before and after. Stage 2 renal cell carcinoma. Kidney cancer. I barely remember driving home. The world had taken on a surreal quality, as if I was moving through a dream. I kept thinking about my husband Richard, who had passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. How I wished he was here. Even though our marriage had its challenges, having him by my side during something like this would have made all the difference. Instead, I called my children. Eric, my 42-year-old son, was a corporate lawyer in downtown Detroit. Vanessa, my 39-year-old daughter, worked as a marketing executive and lived just across town with her surgeon husband Michael and my grandchildren Lily and Noah. "I need to talk to both of you," I said, working hard to keep my voice steady. "Can you come over tonight? It's important." They arrived together, exchanging concerned glances as they entered my living room. I'd already set out coffee and the chocolate chip cookies that had been their favorite since childhood. Some habits die hard, even when delivering devastating news. A mother wants to comfort her children. "Mom, what's going on?" Vanessa asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "I was at Dr. Marshall's office today. I have kidney cancer." The room fell silent. Eric's face went pale, and Vanessa's hands flew to her mouth. "It's stage 2, I continued, my voice growing stronger as I pushed through. "It means we caught it relatively early. There are treatment options. Dr. Marshall is referring me to an oncologist at Lakewood Memorial. My first appointment is next week." What followed was a blur of questions. What exactly had the doctor said? What were the treatment options? What was the prognosis? I answered as best I could, sharing the pamphlets and information sheets Dr. Marshall had given me. "The 5-year survival rate is actually quite good," I explained, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Over 70%. And I'm otherwise healthy." Eric nodded, his lawyer brain already calculating, analyzing. Vanessa wiped tears from her cheeks. I'll move in with you, she offered immediately. Michael can handle the kids for a while. Absolutely not, I said firmly. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. The treatments will be challenging, yes, but I don't need a nursemaid. But Mom, they both started simultaneously. What I need, I interrupted, is your emotional support. Not for you to put your lives on hold. They reluctantly agreed, though I could tell neither was satisfied with my declaration of independence. We talked for another hour, making plans for my upcoming appointments. They would take turns accompanying me. Eric would research specialists. Vanessa would look into support groups. When they finally left, I sank onto my sofa, letting the tears I'd been holding back flow freely. Not just tears of fear about the cancer, but tears of gratitude that at least I had my children by my side. How wrong I was. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Eric called and asked to come over to discuss some important matters. When he arrived, he wasn't alone. He brought his colleague James Patterson, who specialized in estate law. Mom, this is James. He's one of the best estate attorneys in Michigan, Eric said, setting his briefcase on my kitchen table. Given your diagnosis, we need to get your affairs in order. I felt a chill despite the warm June day. My affairs? Eric, I'm not dying tomorrow. Of course not, James interjected smoothly. But it's always prudent to prepare, especially when facing medical challenges. For the next hour, they outlined an extensive plan for my assets. My house, my retirement accounts, my investments. Everything Richard and I had worked our entire lives to build. They had documents already prepared. Power of attorney, medical, directives, changes to my will. We think it would be best if you transferred the house into a joint ownership with Eric and Vanessa, James explained. And we should move your accounts under their management, just in case you become incapacitated during treatment. My teacher instincts flared up immediately. Something wasn't right. Eric, have you discussed all this with your sister? Of course, he answered too quickly. She agrees completely. I took off my reading glasses and set them on the table. I appreciate your concern, but this seems premature. I'd like to think about it. Eric's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Mom, we don't have time for delays. Your first treatment is next week. What if there are complications? Then we'll deal with them if they happen, I replied calmly. I've taught 6th graders for 30 years, Eric. I know when someone's trying to rush me. After they left, Eric clearly frustrated, I called Vanessa. Did you know your brother brought an estate attorney to my house today? I asked. The pause before she answered told me everything. He mentioned something about helping with paperwork, she said carefully. Mom, we're just worried. The treatments can be rough, and we want to make sure everything's taken care of. So you agree? I should sign over my house and accounts to you two? Another telling pause. It's just a precaution. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You'd still have access to everything. We just want to help. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Something had shifted in my relationship with my children, and I couldn't quite grasp what it was. It was as if my cancer diagnosis had transformed me in their eyes. No longer their capable, independent mother, but a problem to be managed. The next day, I called my own attorney, a woman named Diana Lewis, who had helped Richard and me with our wills years ago. When I explained the situation, her response was immediate concern. Eleanor, do not sign anything they give you, she advised firmly. What they're suggesting goes far beyond reasonable precautions for someone in your situation. This is your first line of treatment, not end-stage care. But why would they? I couldn't finish the sentence. Diana hesitated before answering. I don't want to assume the worst about your children, but I've seen this before. Sometimes a health crisis triggers financial concerns in family members. You think they're after my money? The idea seemed absurd. Eric earned more as a lawyer than I ever had as a teacher. Vanessa and Michael lived in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Lakewood. I'm just saying we should proceed with caution, Diana replied. Let me review anything they want you to sign. I agreed, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Eric's urgency, Vanessa's hesitation on the phone. Were my own children really trying to take control of my assets under the guise of helping me? I decided to do some investigating of my own. The next morning, I drove to Vanessa's house, using my spare key to enter when I knew she'd be at work, and Michael would be at the hospital. I hated the idea of snooping, but something didn't feel right. In Vanessa's home office, I found an email chain printed out and highlighted. It was between my children, and what I read made my blood run cold. Once Mom signs the POA, we can move quickly with the house, Eric had written. The market in Lakewood is hot right now. We could easily get $650K. Vanessa's reply, Don't you think we should wait until after her first round of treatment? She's still so independent. Eric, that's exactly why we need to act now. She'll only get more difficult as this progresses. Dad always said she was stubborn to a fault. I sat down heavily in Vanessa's ergonomic office chair, the pages trembling in my hands. They were planning to sell my home, the home where I'd raised them, the home full of memories with Richard, the garden I'd nurtured for decades, possibly before I'd even started treatment. But it was Eric's next words that truly broke my heart. Look, the oncologist I spoke with was clear. These treatments are expensive. Even with her insurance, there will be costs. By liquidating the house now, we protect our inheritance and have funds for her care. Our inheritance. Not my home, not my sanctuary, but their inheritance. As if I was already gone. I carefully replaced the emails exactly as I'd found them and left, my mind spinning with betrayal and disbelief. On the drive home, I passed Silver Lake, its surface glittering in the morning sun, and I felt a sudden longing for peace, for escape from this nightmare. Back at home, I sat in my garden among my beloved hydrangeas and finally let myself cry, truly cry, for the first time since my diagnosis. Not just about the cancer, which was terrifying enough, but about the realization that my children saw me as something less than human now. A collection of assets, a financial liability, a problem to be solved before it became too complicated. As the afternoon sun warmed my face and dried my tears, something hardened inside me. A resolve, a determination that had always been there, but had perhaps grown dormant in my comfortable retirement. The same determination that had gotten me through college while working 2 jobs, that had helped me manage a classroom of energetic 6th graders for 3 decades, that had carried me through Richard's sudden death 3 years ago. My children had clearly forgotten who they were dealing with. The next day, I made 3 important calls. The first was to Diana Lewis, my attorney. Diana, I need your help. With something more extensive than we discussed, I explained. I want to create a trust for my assets, one that my children cannot access or control. The second call was to Sophia Rodriguez, a financial advisor Richard and I had consulted years ago. I'm making some significant changes to my financial arrangements, I told her. And I need advice about liquidating certain investments without raising red flags. The third call was to Dr. Marshall. I want a second opinion on my treatment options, I said firmly, and I want complete confidentiality about my appointments going forward. That evening, when both Eric and Vanessa came over, ostensibly, to discuss my upcoming treatment, but undoubtedly to press me again about their paperwork, I greeted them with homemade lasagna and a pleasant smile that revealed nothing of what I now knew. Have you had a chance to look over those documents? Eric asked as soon as dinner was over. I nodded thoughtfully. I have. And I've been doing some thinking about the future. I paused, watching their faces carefully. You're right that I need to be practical about what's coming. They exchanged a quick glance of relief. I'm so glad you understand, Mom, Vanessa said, reaching for my hand across the table. We just want what's best for you. I know you do, sweetheart, I replied, giving her hand a squeeze. So, I've made an appointment with Diana Lewis. You remember Dad's and my attorney. She's going to help me update all my paperwork properly. The flash of panic in Eric's eyes was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Mom, James has already prepared everything, he said quickly. Diana will just charge you unnecessary fees to do the same work. I smiled. Perhaps, but I've trusted Diana for 20 years. I'd feel more comfortable with her handling this. Can I at least see what she drafts before you sign? Eric pressed. Of course, I lied smoothly. I value your legal expertise. They left that evening thinking they had merely experienced a small delay in their plans. Little did they know that I was already several steps ahead of them, forming a plan to protect not just my assets, but my dignity and independence. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Between my first oncology appointment, the cancer was indeed stage 2, treatable but requiring aggressive therapy. I met repeatedly with Diana and Sophia, constructing a financial fortress around my assets. We created an irrevocable trust with carefully selected trustees, none of whom were my children. My house was transferred into the trust's ownership. Most of my liquid assets followed. Diana helped me draft a new will and advanced directives that were crystal clear about my wishes. This trust will provide for your medical care, Diana explained as I signed the final documents. But your children won't be able to touch the principal, and they certainly won't be able to sell your house out from under you. And if I don't survive this? I asked, voicing the fear that lingered despite my determination. Then the trust continues according to your instructions, she replied. Your grandchildren's education will be funded. Charitable donations will be made to causes you care about. And yes, Eric and Vanessa will receive inheritances, but as structured payments over time, not lump sums they can squander. I nodded, satisfied. This wasn't about punishing my children. It was about protecting myself and ensuring my wishes were respected, whether I survived this cancer or not. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy with Eric and Vanessa. I allowed them to accompany me to some of my doctor appointments, though never all. I reassured them that I was working on my financial arrangements. I continued to cook Sunday dinners and babysit my grandchildren when needed. But inside, something fundamental had changed. The trust I once had in my children was shattered. The relationship I had assumed would sustain me through this health crisis was revealed to be something far more complicated and conditional than I had ever imagined. As my first chemotherapy session approached, I made one more significant decision. Using some funds I had kept outside the trust, I put a deposit on a modern condo overlooking Silver Lake, a place I had admired on my drives. It was smaller than my house, more manageable, and most importantly, it was mine alone. A fresh start. The day before my treatment was to begin, I invited Eric and Vanessa over once more. They arrived expecting to find me anxious about the chemotherapy. Instead, they found boxes. Mom, what's going on? Vanessa asked, looking around at my partially packed living room. Are you moving? Yes, I said simply. I've purchased a condo on Silver Lake. I'll be moving there next week. What? Eric exclaimed. You can't be serious. You're about to start treatment. This is the worst possible time to move. I smiled calmly. On the contrary, the condo is more manageable, single level, modern amenities. It makes perfect sense for someone in my situation. But your house, Eric began, his face flushing. is no longer a concern of yours, I finished. For him, my voice gentle but firm. Neither is the rest of my estate. Their confused expressions told me they didn't yet understand. I've established an irrevocable trust, I explained. All my assets have been transferred into it. The trust will provide for my medical care and living expenses. It will eventually provide for Lily and Noah's education. And yes, one day it will provide inheritances for both of you. Vanessa sank onto the sofa, her face pale. Eric remained standing, his attorney mind clearly racing to understand the legal implications. You can't do this, he finally said. But his voice lacked conviction. It's already done, I replied. The papers were finalized last week. But why? Vanessa asked, tears forming in her eyes. We were only trying to help you. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, who had somehow convinced herself that selling my home out from under me was an act of love. Were you? I asked softly. Was it really me you were trying to help when you and Eric discussed selling my house before I'd even begun treatment? When you talked about protecting your inheritance? Their shocked expressions confirmed what I had suspected. They never imagined I knew about those conversations. Mom, those emails, they weren't what they seemed, Eric started, but I held up my hand. Please don't insult me further by lying, I said. I raised you both to be better than this. The room fell silent. Outside, a summer storm was gathering, dark clouds rolling in from the west. It seemed fitting somehow. So what now? Eric finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. Now, I said, rising to my feet, I fight this cancer with everything I have. I move into my new home. I live my life on my terms. And you too. I paused, meeting their eyes in turn. You two decide what kind of relationship you want to have with me going forward. Because while I've protected my assets from your control, only you can decide whether you want to repair the trust that's been broken between us. As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming, much like the challenges that lay ahead with my treatment. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had taken back control, not just of my finances, but of my dignity. My children had revealed a side of themselves I had never seen before, or perhaps had chosen not to see. Now everything was in the open, no more pretense, no more secrets. As Eric and Vanessa left that evening, subdued, shaken by the realization that their mother was not the passive victim they had anticipated, I stood at my front door, watching the storm roll in. Lightning flashed across the darkening sky, illuminating my hydrangeas one brilliant moment at a time. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of my cancer treatment, a battle I was not guaranteed to win. But today, I had already claimed a different kind of victory. I had remembered who I was, Eleanor Johansson, not just a mother, not just a cancer patient, but a woman of strength and determination who would not be diminished by disease or betrayal. The first heavy raindrops began to fall as I closed my door. Let the storm come, I thought. I was ready. The morning of my first chemotherapy session dawned with an unusual clarity. I woke before my alarm, the early summer light filtering through, my curtains casting long shadows across the bedroom I had shared with Richard for decades. I lay there for a moment, listening to the birds outside my window and feeling strangely calm. Today would be difficult, the beginning of a grueling treatment regime, but I was facing it on my own terms. I dressed carefully in comfortable clothes, packed a small bag with books, a journal, and a soft blanket Diana had given me as a battle gear gift. I'd asked my neighbor Grace to drive me, politely declining both Eric and Vanessa's insistent offers. The distance I needed from my children right now was not just emotional, but physical. Ready for this, Eleanor? Grace asked as we pulled into the Lakewood Memorial parking lot. As ready as anyone can be, I replied, smoothing my hands over my khakis. Thank you for being here. The oncology wing was bright and modern, not the grim, sterile environment I had imagined. My oncologist, Dr. Patel, met me with a reassuring smile and walked me through exactly what would happen. The nurses were efficient and kind, explaining each step as they inserted my IV and administered pre-medications. Then came the chemotherapy, drugs themselves. I watched the clear liquid flow through the tube and into my veins, amazed that something so innocuous in appearance could be so powerful, could literally determine my future. I closed my eyes and pictured it attacking the cancer cells, fighting for me, with me. 4 hours later, exhausted but relieved to have the first treatment behind me, I let Grace drive me home. So far, I felt okay. Tired, slightly queasy, but generally intact. Dr. Patel had warned me that the side effects would likely worsen over the next few days. I was unlocking my front door when a sleek black BMW pulled into my driveway. Eric. He stepped out in his perfectly tailored suit, looking every inch the successful attorney. But his face betrayed his uncertainty as he approached. "Mom?" he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I took the afternoon off. I thought you might need help after your treatment." I paused, key in the lock, studying my son's face. Was this genuine concern or another attempt to gain control? The doubts that had taken root since discovering their plans now colored every interaction. "I'm okay for now," I said finally. "Grace drove me. The nurses said the worst of it won't hit until tomorrow. Can I at least come in? Maybe make you some tea?" The hopeful note in his voice stirred something in me. Despite everything, this was still my son. The boy who had once brought me dandelions clutched in his chubby fist. The teenager who had dedicated his valedictorian speech to me. The man who had wept openly at his father's funeral. "Tea would be nice," I conceded. Inside, I settled on the sofa while Eric moved around my kitchen with familiar ease. I watched him, trying to reconcile this attentive son with the man who had conspired to sell my home. "Mom," he said, bringing me a steaming mug of ginger tea. "About what happened?" "I'm not sure I'm ready to discuss that yet," I interrupted gently. "Please," he persisted, sitting across from me. "Just hear me out." I nodded, my hands wrapped around the warm mug. "What you saw, those emails, they don't represent the whole picture," he began. "Yes, Vanessa and I talked about selling the house, but it wasn't just about money. We were worried about you managing this place alone while going through treatment." "So concerned that you discussed it behind my back?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "So worried that you brought an estate lawyer here without warning?" Eric had the grace to look ashamed. "We handled it badly. I see that now. But Mom, can you try to understand? When Dad died, you were devastated but still healthy. This is different. Cancer changes everything. We were scared." "Fear doesn't justify deception, Eric," I said quietly. "If you were truly concerned about me managing the house, you could have talked to me directly, suggested downsizing, offered to help with maintenance. Instead, you made plans to liquidate my home, the home where you grew up, without my knowledge or consent." "I know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it made my heart ache. "Part of it was legal instinct. I deal with estates and assets all day. I immediately thought about practical arrangements, protection, contingency plans. I went into problem-solving mode without considering how it would feel from your perspective." I sipped my tea, considering his words. There was truth in them. I could sense it. Eric had always been analytical, solution-focused. It was what made him an excellent attorney. But there was still something he wasn't addressing. "And the inheritance? Comments?" I pressed. "Explaining to your sister that selling my house would protect your inheritance?" Eric flushed deep red. That was inexcusable. I was thinking like a lawyer, not a son. looking at worst-case scenarios, at how expensive cancer treatment can be even with good insurance. I've seen clients lose everything to medical bills. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. It wasn't about wanting your money, Mom. It was about making sure you had enough for your care no matter what happened. I studied him, searching for signs of deception, but found only remorse. Still, intentions aside, his actions had revealed a fundamental lack of respect for my autonomy. I believe that you believe that, I said finally. But Eric, I'm still your mother, still of sound mind, still capable of making my own decisions. The way you and Vanessa went about this, trying to get me to sign papers when I was vulnerable, making plans without including me, it felt like you saw me as incompetent the moment I got sick. I'm sorry, he said, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. I handled this all wrong. We both did. But please don't shut us out, Mom. Let us be part of your journey through this. Let us help, on your terms. The sincerity in his voice touched me. Perhaps there was a path forward, albeit a different one than before. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I need you to understand something, Eric. My decision about the trust stands. My choice to move to the condo stands. I won't be returning to a relationship where my children make decisions for me rather than with me. He nodded slowly. I understand, and the trust. It's actually a smart move. Legally sound. A faint smile crossed his face. Diana Lewis did a good job. She did, I agreed. Now, if you really want to help today, those boxes in the dining room need to be packed. I'm moving next week, remember? Eric's smile broadened slightly, recognizing the small olive branch I was extending. Consider it done. For the next 2 hours, as the initial fatigue from the chemotherapy began to settle into my bones, Eric packed books and kitchenware, labeled boxes, and called a moving company on my behalf. We didn't speak much, but the silence was no longer tense. It was a beginning, not of reconciliation exactly, but of a recalibration. When Vanessa called that evening, her voice tearful and apologetic, I extended the same careful peace terms to her. Yes, I would still welcome her visits. No, I would not reconsider the trust. Yes, I still wanted to see my grandchildren. No, I would not delay my move. By the end of that first treatment day, I had established new boundaries with both my children. Boundaries that acknowledged the broken trust between us, but left room for rebuilding, on my terms. The next morning, the side effects hit with a vengeance. Nausea that came in waves. Fatigue so profound I could barely lift my head from the pillow. Every joint ached as if I'd aged decades overnight. I managed to text Grace, who came immediately with ginger ale and crackers, helping me to the bathroom when needed and sitting quietly beside me when all I could do was lie still and endure. Through the haze of discomfort, I found myself thinking about my students over the years. How many times had I told them that difficult challenges revealed character? That it wasn't our circumstances, but our responses to them that defined us? Now I was living that lesson in the most visceral way possible. By the third day, the worst had passed, and I was able to sit up, sip broth, and look through real estate listings online. The condo I had chosen needed some modifications to make it truly mine. Fresh paint in the bedroom, new fixtures in the kitchen, bookshelves built into the living room wall. I made notes, sketched ideas, planned my new space. It gave me purpose, something to focus on beyond the cancer and the treatments. The following week was a blur of activity. Despite my still limited energy, I supervised the move with determination. Eric helped coordinate the movers. Vanessa brought meals and organized my kitchen. They were trying, both of them, to respect my independence while still offering support. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, times when old patterns threatened to emerge. But we were learning a new way of relating, forced into it by crisis, but perhaps better for it in the end. My new condo exceeded my expectations. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the shimmering surface of Silver Lake. The modern open layout meant I could rest in my recliner while still feeling connected to the kitchen and dining area. The master bathroom had a walk-in shower with a bench, perfect for days when standing was too exhausting. Most importantly, it was mine. A fresh start, a declaration of my continued agency in my own life. The day after I moved in, Sofia Rodriguez, my financial advisor, came to visit. Smart, efficient, and refreshingly direct, she spread papers across my new dining table and walked me through the details of my restructured finances. "The trust is rock solid," she confirmed. "Your medical expenses are covered. Your living expenses are secured. And I've set up the investment portfolio exactly as we discussed, conservative enough for stability but with growth potential to outpace inflation." "Thank you, Sophia," I said, signing the final authorization forms. "It gives me peace of mind knowing this is all arranged." She hesitated, gathering her papers. "If you don't mind my asking, how are things with your children now? Has the situation improved?" I gazed out at the lake, considering. "We're finding our way," I said finally. "They're adjusting to the new reality. So am I." "And the cancer treatment? How are you holding up?" "One day at a time," I replied with a small smile. "My next session is tomorrow. My friend Claire is driving me." Claire Bennett was my newest friend, a 63-year-old dynamo I'd met at a cancer support group meeting. A breast cancer survivor herself, she approached life with a frankness and humor that I found immensely comforting. When I told her about my situation with Eric and Vanessa, she'd laughed out loud. "Why is it that the moment we get sick, our children think our brains stop working?" she'd quipped. "My son tried to take my car keys the day after my diagnosis. My car keys, as if breast cancer affected my driving." Claire arrived early the next morning, breezily dismissing my warning about treatment days being difficult. "Honey, I've held back more puke than a kindergarten teacher during flu season," she declared. "Nothing you dish out is going to scare me." Her irreverence was exactly what I needed. At the hospital, she charmed the nurses, bullied the parking attendant into giving us a spot closer to the entrance, and produced an iPad loaded with our favorite old movies to distract me during the long infusion. "So," she said, once the nurses had started my drip and left us relatively private, "tell me more about this trust you set up. Sounds like you pulled off quite the power move." I found myself laughing despite the circumstances. I suppose I did. I just couldn't bear the thought of them making decisions about my home, my possessions, my life, as if I was already gone. "Good for you," Claire said approvingly. "Too many people our age just roll over when their kids start making demands." "Oh, you think I should move to assisted living? Okay, dear." "Oh, you want to put my house on the market?" "Whatever you think is best." She snorted derisively. "Drives me crazy." "It's not that I don't understand their concern," I admitted. "Cancer is scary, for everyone." "Sure it is," Claire agreed. "But concern doesn't justify a takeover. My kids were worried sick when I was diagnosed, but they asked what I needed. They didn't start liquidating my assets." Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. The issue wasn't that my children were concerned. It was how that concern had manifested as control rather than support. "I think what hurt the most," I said slowly, "was realizing they didn't see me as capable anymore. The moment I said cancer, I became a problem to manage, not a person to support." Claire reached over and squeezed my hand. "Well, you certainly showed them otherwise, didn't you? New condo, ironclad trust, boundaries firmly in place. Eleanor Johansson doesn't mess around." I smiled at her assessment. "I suppose not." By the time my second treatment was finished, I was genuinely grateful for Claire's friendship. As predicted, the side effects hit even harder than the first time. Claire stayed overnight, efficiently handling my nausea, keeping track of my medications, and distracting me with outrageous stories from her days as a business owner. "You should meet my friend David," she said casually as she helped me back to bed after a particularly rough bout of sickness. "He's a retired park ranger, widower, smart as a whip and handsome to boot. Makes a mean vegetable soup that might actually taste good even with chemo mouth." Claire," I groaned. "I'm bald, green, and can barely keep water down. Romance is the last thing on my mind." "Who said anything about romance?" she replied innocently. "I just thought you might enjoy his soup, and his company, and maybe his ruggedly handsome face. When you're feeling better, of course." I threw a washcloth at her, which she dodged with a laugh. But 3 weeks later, when my hair had begun falling out in clumps, and I finally asked Claire to help me shave it completely, she brought up David again. "He lost his wife to lymphoma," she said quietly, as she ran the electric razor carefully over my scalp. "He gets it, Eleanor. He understands what you're going through in a way most people can't." I caught her eye in the bathroom mirror. "Are you really trying to set me up while giving me a cancer buzz cut?" "Is it working?" she asked with a grin. Despite myself, I laughed. "You're incorrigible. Life doesn't stop with a diagnosis." "Eleanor," she said, her tone growing serious. "That's the biggest lie we tell ourselves. After cancer, I'll start living again. No. During cancer, we live. Through cancer, we live. That's the only victory that matters in the end." Her words stayed with me over the following days as I adjusted to my new reflection, a stranger with a smooth scalp and hollowed cheeks who nevertheless had my eyes, my smile, my determination. When Eric visited and did a double take at my shaved head, I straightened my shoulders and met his gaze directly. "It was falling out anyway," I said matter-of-factly. "This feels more like a choice." He nodded slowly. "It suits you, actually. Very. Badass." The unexpected word made me laugh. "Badass? Is that how you see your 65-year-old mother?" "After what you've done these past weeks," he replied with a rueful smile. "Absolutely." There was a new respect in his eyes, one I hadn't seen before. Perhaps in some strange way, my illness and my response to it were forcing Eric to see me not just as his mother, but as a woman of strength and complexity. Vanessa's reaction was more emotional. She cried when she saw my bare head, then immediately apologized. "It's just hair," I reassured her. "It'll grow back." "I know," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's not that. It's just everything. I've been so wrapped up in how your cancer affects me, affects our family. I didn't stop to think about what you're actually going through, the physical reality of it." Her honesty was refreshing. "It's difficult for everyone in so different ways," I acknowledged. "I'm still figuring out how to navigate this, too." "But you're doing it with such grace," she said, taking my hand. "The way you've handled everything, the diagnosis, the treatment, even what happened with me, and Eric. You're showing me what real strength looks like." For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt a genuine reconnection with my daughter. Not the superficial peace we'd established, but something deeper, a mutual recognition of each other as complete people, flawed but trying. That evening, after Vanessa left, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. A cool breeze caressed my bare scalp, a strange but not unpleasant sensation. Below, people walked their dogs along the shoreline path. Children raced on bicycles, couples strolled hand in hand. Life, in all its ordinary, extraordinary beauty, continued. I thought about what Claire had said about living through cancer, not just after it. About how my diagnosis had forced a reckoning not just with my mortality, but with my relationships, my independence, my sense of self. Had I needed cancer to reclaim my autonomy from well-meaning but controlling children? To establish boundaries I should have set long ago? To recognize my own strength? My phone pinged with a text message from Claire. David's making his famous soup tomorrow. Dinner at his place? I'll drive. Say yes or I'll keep texting until you do. I smiled, shaking my head at her persistence. Then, after only a brief hesitation, I typed, yes. Was I really considering meeting someone new in the midst of all this? With my body changing daily, my energy unpredictable, my future uncertain? It seemed absurd on the surface. And yet, why not? If cancer had taught me anything, it was that waiting for perfect circumstances was a fool's game. The next day, I spent more time than I'd like to admit selecting an outfit for dinner at David's. Most of my clothes hung loosely on my frame now. The treatments had stripped nearly 15 pounds from my already slender build. Eventually, I settled on a flowing tunic over slim pants, adding a colorful scarf wrapped around my head. Looking. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. But the woman who looked back at me had clear eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She would do. Claire arrived precisely on time, assessed my outfit with an approving nod, and ushered me to her car. David lives about 20 minutes from here, she explained as we drove. Beautiful little cottage on the other side of the lake. He's got a workshop where he makes furniture now. Wait till you see it. The man has talent. Claire, I said, sudden nervousness making my voice tight. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I'm in the middle of chemo. I look like a strong wind could blow me over. Eleanor Johansson, she replied firmly. The man is making you soup, not proposing marriage. And trust me, after what his wife went through, your appearance is the last thing he's going to be concerned about. She was right, of course. When David Morales opened his front door, his warm brown eyes crinkled with a smile that contained nothing but genuine welcome. Tall and broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard, he exuded a calm, steady presence that immediately put me at ease. You must be Eleanor, he said, his deep voice carrying a slight hint of his Puerto Rican heritage. Claire's told me so much about you. Please, come in. The soup's almost ready. His cottage was exactly as I would have imagined. Warm woods, comfortable furniture that invited you to sink in and stay a while. Large windows that captured the lake view. Books lined the walls, and the scent of garlic and herbs filled the air. Claire tells me you were a teacher, David said as he ladled soup into handcrafted wooden bowls. What grade? 6th, I replied, accepting the steaming bowl with gratitude. The rich aroma actually stimulated my appetite for the first time in weeks. For over 30 years at Lakewood Middle School. Brave woman, he said with a chuckle. I've hiked through grizzly territory that scared me less than a room full of 12-year-olds. They're not so bad once you learn to speak their language, I replied, surprised at how easily conversation flowed. Throughout dinner, Claire orchestrated the discussion with subtle skill, drawing out our common interests. Hiking, classical music, mystery novels, while tactfully avoiding prolonged talk of illness. When she excused herself to make an important call after dinner, leaving David and me alone on his deck overlooking the water, I shot her a knowing look that she pretended not to see. Your friend isn't exactly subtle, David commented once. She'd gone inside. I laughed. No, subtlety isn't Claire's strong suit. I don't mind, he said, his expression growing more serious. I've wanted to meet you since she first mentioned you. My wife, Maria. He hesitated, then continued. She faced her illness with such courage. When Claire described how you handled your children's attempt to take control, how you created a new life for yourself even in the midst of treatment, it reminded me of her spirit. I'm not sure it was courage so much as stubbornness, I admitted. Sometimes they're the same thing, he replied with a gentle smile. We talked for another hour as the sun set and stars appeared over the lake. He told me about his 30 years as a park ranger, about losing Maria 5 years ago, about discovering woodworking as therapy during his grief. I found myself sharing stories of my teaching career, of Richard, of my complicated relationships, With Eric and Vanessa, it was the most natural conversation I'd had in years. No pretense, no careful navigation of touchy subjects, just honest exchange between two people who had lived long enough to value authenticity. When Claire finally emerged to announce it was time to take me home, chemotherapy fatigue was predictable in its timing, David walked us to the car. "I'd like to see you again, Eleanor," he said directly. "Perhaps I could bring soup to your place next time. Save you the trip." The old Eleanor might have hesitated, might have made excuses about not being ready, about the cancer making everything too complicated. But I was no longer that woman. "I'd like that," I replied simply. As Claire drove me home, she maintained a smug silence for approximately 3 minutes before bursting out, "Well, didn't I tell you? Isn't he wonderful?" "He seems very nice," I said, trying and failing to sound non-committal. "Nice?" she scoffed. "Eleanor, the man is a catch, and he likes you. I could tell." "Claire, I'm in the middle of cancer treatment. Dating isn't exactly a priority right now." "Who said anything about dating?" she replied, echoing her earlier disingenuousness. "It's just soup between friends." Despite my exhaustion, I laughed. "You're impossible." "I prefer determined," she corrected. "Besides, what better time to meet someone who understands what you're going through? Someone who won't be scared off by the hard parts?" She had a point. David's experience with his wife's illness meant he approached my situation without the fear or awkwardness many people couldn't help but show. He saw beyond the cancer to the woman underneath, something I was still learning to do myself. By the time we reached my condo, I was fighting to keep my eyes open. Claire helped me inside and made sure I had water and my evening medications before leaving with a parting shot. "I expect a full report after his next visit. Details, Eleanor. I need details." Alone in my new home, I realized with some surprise that I was smiling. Despite the cancer, despite the ongoing tension with my children, despite the physical toll of treatment, perhaps even because of these challenges, I was discovering new dimensions of myself, new possibilities I had never considered. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of a framed photograph on my nightstand, one of the few personal items I'd brought from my old house. It showed me and Richard on our 30th anniversary, both of us gray-haired but beaming at the camera. I touched his face gently through the glass. "You'd approve, I think," I murmured. "Of all of it. The trust, the condo, even meeting David. You always said I was stronger than I knew." Settling into bed, I felt a curious sense of anticipation beneath my fatigue. For my next treatment, yes, and the challenges it would bring. But also for whatever lay beyond it. The continuing evolution of my relationships with my children. The potential friendship, or perhaps more, with David. The life I was rebuilding on my own terms. Cancer had not defined me. My children's actions had not defeated me. Instead, these challenges had revealed aspects of my character that perhaps had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Tomorrow would bring another day of this new life I was creating. A life I had never planned for, but was nonetheless embracing with all the courage and determination I could muster. And for tonight, that knowledge was enough. My third chemotherapy session fell on a Tuesday in early August. The summer heat had reached its peak, making the lake outside my condo window shimmer like molten silver. David had offered to drive me, but I'd asked Claire instead. Though we'd shared 2 more dinners since our first meeting, I wasn't quite ready for David to see me at my most vulnerable, curled over a hospital basin, trembling with nausea, drifting in and out of lucidity as the powerful drugs coursed through my system. Claire, as always, was the perfect treatment companion, irreverent enough to distract me, experienced enough to know when to simply hold my hand in silence. Dr. Patel seemed pleased with my progress, though progress felt like a strange word, for what was essentially a controlled poisoning of my body in hopes of killing the cancer faster than it killed me. "Your blood work is looking good," she noted, reviewing my chart. How are you managing the side effects? Some days are better than others, I admitted. The fatigue is the hardest part. She nodded sympathetically. That's common. Have your children been helping? I hesitated, not sure how to explain the complicated new dynamics with Eric and Vanessa. They're supportive in their own ways. Dr. Patel gave me a knowing look. Family relationships often get tested during cancer treatment. Everyone reacts differently to the stress. That's putting it mildly, I replied with a wry smile. After my treatment, Claire helped me settle on my couch with a light blanket and ginger tea, promising to return in the morning. The post-chemo routine was familiar now. The slow descent into bone-deep exhaustion, the metallic taste coating my tongue, the strange disconnection from my own body. I closed my eyes, hoping to drift into sleep before the worst of the side effects hit. A soft knock at my door roused me. Expecting Claire, who often forgot something, I called weakly, "It's open." The door swung inward to reveal not Claire, but Patricia Coleman, a slim, elegantly dressed woman in her early 60s, whom I had met only once before at a fundraiser years ago. She was, I knew from town gossip, recently divorced from her wealthy husband and had returned to Lakewood after decades away. More relevantly, she had also been Richard's college girlfriend before we met. "Eleanor," she said, her voice carrying a confidence that immediately put me on edge. "I hope I'm not intruding. Your daughter gave me your address." I struggled to sit up straighter, acutely aware of my appearance. Bald head uncovered, skin sallow from treatment, wearing only loose pajamas and a robe. Patricia, by contrast, looked immaculate in a designer pantsuit, her silver-streaked hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. "Vanessa gave you my address?" I asked, confusion momentarily overriding my discomfort at being caught in such a state. "Yes," Patricia replied, stepping further into my living room without waiting for an invitation. "We ran into each other at the Silver Pines Country Club last week. She mentioned you'd moved." She glanced around my condo with an appraising eye. "Downsizing, I see." There was something in her tone, a subtle condescension, that immediately raised my hackles. I'd known women like Patricia my entire life, women who used politeness as camouflage for judgment, whose every compliment contained a hidden barb. "What can I do for you, Patricia?" I asked directly, too exhausted for social niceties. She seemed momentarily taken aback by my bluntness, but recovered quickly. "I heard about your diagnosis. I wanted to see how you were doing." Her gaze lingered on my bare head. "And to offer my assistance." "That's very thoughtful," I replied, not believing it for a second. Patricia Coleman and I had never been friends. In fact, I suspected she had always resented me for stealing Richard all those years ago, though their relationship had ended months before he and I met. She settled uninvited onto my armchair, crossing her legs elegantly. "I know how challenging a cancer diagnosis can be. My sister went through it last year. She found that having someone manage things for her was invaluable." I tensed. "Manage things?" "Oh, you know." Patricia waved a manicured hand vaguely. "Appointments, medications, household matters. Your children mentioned they've been concerned about you handling everything alone." So that was it. Patricia hadn't come out of kindness but as some sort of, what? Emissary from my children? The realization sent a flash of anger through me, momentarily burning away the fog of chemotherapy. "My children mentioned this to you?" I asked, keeping my voice deliberately calm. "Vanessa did, yes. She seemed quite worried." Patricia leaned forward confidentially. "She said you've been making some impulsive decisions since your diagnosis. That's perfectly normal, of course. Trauma can affect our judgment." The condescension was no longer subtle. I straightened, pulling my robe tighter around me. Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but I'm managing perfectly well. I have support from good friends, and any decisions I've made have been carefully considered, not impulsive. She smiled thinly. Of course, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. But sometimes we don't realize how our choices affect those who love us. Your children only want what's best for you. And they sent you to tell me this? The anger was building. Now, a welcome heat that pushed back against the chemo-induced chill. Patricia had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Not exactly. But when Vanessa mentioned their concerns, I offered to check in on you. I have experience with this, Eleanor. My sister was determined to manage everything herself too, until she realized it was simply too much. I'm not your sister, I said flatly. And while I appreciate the visit, I'm quite tired from my treatment today. Perhaps another time would be better. She didn't take the hint. Instead, she reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a business card. This is my estate manager. Brilliant man. Very discreet. He could help you organize your affairs, make sure everything is properly arranged for your children. I stared at the card she held out, then back at her face, searching for some sign that she understood how inappropriate her suggestion was. Finding none, I decided directness was my only option. Patricia, I said slowly, did Vanessa or Eric ask you to convince me to change my trust arrangements? Her momentary silence and the flash of something, guilt, frustration, across her face told me everything I needed to know. I see, I continued, not waiting for her response. Well, you can tell them that my affairs, as you put it, are perfectly in order. My trust is established exactly as I want it. My financial arrangements are complete, and my decisions are my own. Patricia's expression hardened. They're concerned about you, Eleanor. Is it so wrong for children to want to protect their mother's assets? After all, these treatments are expensive, and there's no guarantee. No guarantee I'll survive? I finished for her, my voice steady despite the exhaustion threatening to overwhelm me. That's true. There isn't. But whether I have 2 months or 20 years left, I intend to live them on my terms, not as a project for my children to manage or their friends to intrude upon. Color rose in Patricia's cheeks. I was only trying to help. Were you? I asked quietly. Or were you enjoying the role of messenger a little too much? We both know there's never been much love lost between us, Patricia. She stood abruptly, smoothing her pantsuit. I can see this was a mistake. I told Vanessa you were too stubborn to listen to reason, but she insisted you respected me because of my connection to Richard. The mention of my late husband's name in this context sparked a deeper anger. Richard would be appalled by this visit, I said, my voice low but firm. He always respected my independence. He would never have treated me as an incompetent child, the moment illness struck. Patricia gathered her purse, her movements sharp with annoyance. Perhaps he would have wanted to ensure his children were provided for. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Think about them, Eleanor. Your pride could cost them their inheritance. When the door closed behind her, I sat in stunned silence, her last words echoing in my mind. Your pride could cost them their inheritance. As if my only value now was in what I could leave behind. As if my life was already over, and all that remained was the distribution of my worldly goods. I reached for my phone with trembling hands and called Vanessa. Mom? She answered, her voice immediately concerned. Are you okay? How was treatment? Did you send Patricia Coleman to my home? I asked without preamble. The long pause told me everything. I ran into her at the club. I mentioned I was worried about you. She offered to visit. And did you also discuss my financial arrangements with her? My trust? Another telling pause. Mom, she's experienced with these things. I thought she might be able to explain better than I could why we're concerned. Concerned, I repeated flatly. Vanessa, I just finished a chemotherapy session. I'm exhausted, nauseated, and feeling absolutely wretched. And instead of coming yourself to check on me, you sent a woman I barely know, and certainly don't like, to lecture me about my pride, costing you your inheritance. That's not, Vanessa began, but I cut her off. That's exactly what happened. She made it very clear that you and Eric are still fixated on my assets. After everything we've discussed, after I thought we were finding a new way forward, you went behind my back. Again. Mom, please. Vanessa's voice cracked. It wasn't like that. We're just worried. The medical bills are piling up, and your insurance doesn't cover everything. We don't want you to deplete everything just to save my own life? I finished for her. How inconsiderate of me. That's not fair, she protested. We want you to have the best care possible. But we also want to protect what Dad worked so hard to build. Is that so wrong? I closed my eyes, a wave of fatigue crashing over me. What your father built, I said quietly. He built with me, Vanessa. 35 years of marriage, of shared sacrifices and decisions. And what we built for ourselves first, not as a future inheritance for our children. I didn't mean, I need to rest now, I interrupted, unable to continue the conversation as another wave of nausea threatened. Please don't send any more messengers to my home, and tell your brother that if he has something to say to me, he can say it himself instead of using Patricia Coleman as a proxy. I ended the call before she could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. The confrontation had drained what little energy the chemotherapy had left me, and now all I wanted was silence, darkness, and sleep. The next morning, Claire found me still on the couch, a testament to just how exhausted I'd been. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong beyond the usual post-chemo misery. What happened? She asked bluntly, setting down a bag of groceries she'd brought. I told her about Patricia's visit, about the phone call with Vanessa. With each word, Claire's expression darkened. Unbelievable, she said when I finished. They're still trying to get around your trust? After everything? I thought we were making progress, I admitted. That they were starting to respect my decisions. But it seems they've just changed tactics. Claire snorted. Sending Richard's ex-girlfriend as their representative? That's not just a change. In tactics, that's a new low. Despite my exhaustion and disappointment, I had to smile at her indignation on my behalf. Patricia wasn't exactly his ex-girlfriend. They dated briefly in college, that's all. Still, Claire insisted, it's inappropriate on every level. And for her to show up on a treatment day, when she knew you'd be at your most vulnerable, that's just cruel. She was right, of course. The timing suggested a deliberate strategy, not just a friendly visit. The thought that my own children might have orchestrated it that way sent a fresh wave of hurt through me. What are you going to do? Claire asked, sitting beside me on the couch. I sighed, leaning my head back. I don't know. Part of me wants to cut them off completely. No visits, no calls, nothing until they truly accept my decisions. But they're still my children. And deep down, I believe they think they're acting out of love, misguided as it is. Love doesn't look like this, Claire said firmly. Control disguised as concern isn't love. Her words hit home, resonating, with thoughts I'd been afraid to articulate even to myself. Had my relationship with Eric and Vanessa always had this dynamic? Had I been so focused on being a supportive, understanding mother that I'd failed to establish proper boundaries long ago? You're right, I said finally, which means it's time for even clearer boundaries. Over the next few days, as I recovered from the treatment, I thought carefully about how to proceed. This wasn't just about the trust or my financial arrangements anymore. It was about establishing a new kind of relationship with my adult children, one based on mutual respect rather than their assumption of authority over me. When I felt strong enough, I called Diana Lewis, my attorney, and asked her to meet me at my condo. She arrived promptly the following afternoon, her briefcase in hand, her expression concerned when she saw my diminished state. "Eleanor," she said, settling across from me at my dining table, "you look like you've been through the ringer." "Chemotherapy will do that," I replied with a wan smile, "but I'm tougher than I look." "I never doubted it," she said. "Now what can I do for you? Is there an issue with the trust?" "Not with the trust itself," I explained. "It's working exactly as designed, but my children are still trying to circumvent it, this time through intermediaries." I outlined Patricia's visit and my subsequent conversation with Vanessa. Diana listened intently, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "This isn't just inappropriate," she said when I finished. "It borders on harassment. You're a competent adult making sound decisions about your own assets. The fact that you're ill doesn't change that." "Exactly," I agreed. "But how do I make that absolutely clear to them? The trust protects my assets, but it doesn't seem to be enough to stop them from continuing to push." Diana thought for a moment, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "We could add a clause to the trust," she said slowly. "A provision that states explicitly that any attempt to contest the trust or exert undue influence over its terms would result in a reduction of their eventual inheritance." "A no-contest clause," I murmured. The idea was both appealing and disturbing. Would I really need to threaten my own children with disinheritance to get them to respect my autonomy? "It's a nuclear option," Diana admitted, seeming to read my thoughts. "And it doesn't address the underlying issue of their attitude toward your independence. But legally, it would give them a concrete reason to back off." I shook my head. "I don't want to threaten them. I want them to understand." "Then perhaps a family meeting," Diana suggested. "With me present as your legal representative. We can outline the trust provisions again, explain your reasoning, and make it absolutely clear that your decisions are final." It wasn't ideal. I hated the thought of needing a lawyer present to speak to my own children, but it seemed like the clearest path forward. "Let's do it," I decided. "Can you reach out to them directly? Schedule something for next week?" Diana nodded, making notes. "I'll take care of it." "And Eleanor?" she added, her expression softening. "How are you really doing? With the treatment, I mean." The question caught me off guard. Most people either avoided asking directly about my cancer or focused obsessively on medical details. Diana's simple, direct inquiry felt refreshingly honest. "It's hard," I admitted. "Harder than I expected. The physical toll is one thing, but the emotional weight of it, the uncertainty, the constant recalibration of expectations, that's the real challenge." She nodded slowly. "I can only imagine. Is there anything else I can do? Beyond the legal work?" I smiled, touched by her genuine concern. "Actually, yes. Could you help me draft a letter? Something separate from the trust, but equally binding. A document that outlines my wishes for my care if I become unable to make decisions. Not just the standard medical directives, but my personal preferences." "Of course," Diana said already, reaching for her legal pad. "What specifically do you want to include?" For the next hour, we worked together to create what Diana called an ethical will, a document that wouldn't have legal force like my medical directives, but would clearly articulate my values and wishes regarding my care, my living situation, and my autonomy. It felt good to put these things in writing, to create a record of my thoughts and preferences that my children couldn't misinterpret or dismiss. The family meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday at Diana's office downtown. I deliberately chose a day when I would be between treatments, when my energy would be at its relative peak. Still, I asked David to drive me, needing the moral support his steady presence provided. Our relationship had deepened over the past weeks, evolving from Claire's orchestrated introduction to something meaningful and sustaining. David never pushed for more than I could give, never seemed bothered by the limitations my illness imposed. Instead, he adapted, bringing his woodworking sketches to show me on days when conversation was beyond me, sitting in comfortable silence while I rested, cooking simple meals that tempted my unreliable appetite. "Are you sure you want me there?" he asked as we drove to Diana's office. "This seems like a private family matter." "You've seen me throwing up into a bucket," I replied dryly. "I think we're past worrying about privacy. Besides," I added more seriously, "I trust your judgment, and right now, I need someone in my corner who isn't paid to be there." He reached across the console to squeeze my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Then I'll be there. Whatever you need." Eric and Vanessa were already seated in Diana's conference room when we arrived. Their expressions when they saw David enter with me ranged from surprise to suspicion to, in Vanessa's case, a flash of what looked almost like hurt. "Mom," Eric said, standing as I entered. "How are you feeling?" "As well as can be expected," I replied neutrally, taking a seat across from them. "This is David Morales, a friend who was kind enough to drive me today." David nodded politely, but said nothing, taking the chair beside me. Diana, seated at the head of the table, waited until we were all settled before beginning. "Thank you all for coming," she said formally. "Eleanor has asked me to convene this meeting to address ongoing concerns about her financial and medical decisions." Eric immediately straightened, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "Is there a problem with the trust? Because if so—" "The trust is sound," Diana interrupted smoothly. "This meeting is about ensuring everyone understands and respects Eleanor's wishes regarding her assets and her care." "We do respect her wishes," Vanessa protested, shooting a wary glance at David. "We're just concerned about her making decisions, while under the stress of illness that she might regret later." I took a deep breath, determined to remain calm. Vanessa, sending Patricia Coleman to my home on a treatment day to lecture me about my pride, costing you your inheritance, is not respecting my wishes. Vanessa had the grace to look embarrassed. "That wasn't my intention. She offered to check on you, that's all." "Yet somehow she knew details about my trust arrangements," I pressed. "Details only you or Eric could have shared with her." Eric shifted uncomfortably. "We might have mentioned our concerns to her. She's experienced with estate matters." "She's experienced with inserting herself where she doesn't belong," I corrected. "And more to the point, my estate is not open for discussion with your social acquaintances." Diana cleared her throat. "Let me be perfectly clear about the legal situation here. Eleanor has established an irrevocable trust. She is of sound mind, as documented by medical and psychological evaluations conducted prior to the trust's creation. The terms cannot be contested or changed without Eleanor's explicit consent." "We're not trying to contest anything," Eric insisted, looking increasingly defensive. "We just want to make sure Mom's provided for, that the medical expenses don't deplete everything." "The trust is specifically structured to cover those expenses," Diana replied calmly. "Eleanor's medical care is fully funded through the trust, separate from the assets designated for eventual inheritance." "And what if the cancer progresses?" Vanessa asked, her voice breaking slightly. "What if treatments get more expensive? What if I die?" I finished for her, my voice gentle despite my frustration. "Vanessa, that's a possibility whether we want to face it or not. But the trust is designed to handle all contingencies, including extended care if needed." "We're just scared, Mom," Vanessa admitted, tears filling her eyes. "Ever since your diagnosis, it feels like everything is spinning out of control. First the cancer, then you moved, established this trust. It all happened so fast. For the first time, I glimpsed the genuine fear beneath their actions. Not just fear of losing their inheritance, as I had cynically assumed, but fear of losing me. Fear of change. Fear of a future that suddenly seemed precarious in ways they had never had to confront before. I understand that, I said, softening my tone. Cancer is terrifying, for the patient and for the family. But my response to that fear can't be to surrender my autonomy or to pretend death isn't a possibility. We don't want you to do that, Eric insisted. We just want to help manage things, to take some burden off you. But that's just it, I replied, leaning forward earnestly. My finances, my living situation, my treatment decisions, these aren't burdens to be taken from me. They're expressions of my agency, my personhood. When you try to take control of them, even with the best intentions, you're not helping me. You're diminishing me. A heavy silence fell over the room. David's steady presence beside me gave me courage to continue. I've drafted something I'd like you both to read, I said, nodding to Diana, who slid copies of my ethical will across the table to Eric and Vanessa. This document outlines my wishes regarding my care and my autonomy. It's not legally binding, like my medical directives, but I hope it will help you understand my perspective better. They read in silence, expressions shifting as they absorbed my carefully chosen words about dignity, respect, and self-determination in the face of illness. I had written of my love for them, my understanding of their concern, but also my unwavering commitment to living and, if necessary, dying on my own terms. When they finished reading, Vanessa was openly crying. Eric's jaw worked as he struggled to maintain his composure. "Mom," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion, "I never meant to make you feel this way. I just wanted to protect you." "I know," I said gently, "but I don't need protection from my own decisions. I need support for them, even when you don't fully understand or agree with them." "We can do that," Vanessa said quickly, wiping her eyes. "We want to do that." "Then prove it," I said firmly. "No more end runs around the trust. No more sending emissaries to pressure me. No more treating my illness as an opportunity to take control of my life." They both nodded, seemingly chastened. Diana summarized the key points we had discussed, emphasizing once more the legal soundness of the trust and the importance of respecting my autonomy. By the time the meeting concluded, I felt cautiously optimistic that we had finally reached a genuine understanding. As David helped me to his car afterward, I leaned heavily on his arm, the emotional toll of the confrontation catching up with my already depleted energy. "You were magnificent in there," he said quietly as he opened the passenger door for me. "Standing your ground like that took courage." "It shouldn't have to," I replied wearily. "They're my children. This shouldn't be a battle." "True," he acknowledged, sliding into the driver's seat. "But families are complicated, and facing mortality, whether your own or a parent's, brings out both the best and worst in people." I gazed out the window as we drove along the lake. Shore, the water glittering in the late afternoon sun. "Do you think they finally understand? Or will I be fighting this same battle again in a month?" David considered the question seriously. "I think they heard you today. Really heard you. Whether that translates to lasting change?" He shrugged. "Only time will tell." "I'm running out of energy to keep fighting," I admitted. "The cancer takes so much already. I don't have much left for these emotional battles." He reached across to take my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Then let others fight for you when needed. You have Diana. You have Claire." He hesitated, then added softly, "You have me." The simple declaration brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In the midst of all this struggle, with cancer, with my children, with my own mortality, here was this good man offering his steadfast support, expecting nothing in return. "Thank you," I whispered, squeezing his hand, "for everything." When we arrived at my condo, David insisted on coming up with me to make sure I was settled comfortably. As he prepared tea in my kitchen, moving with easy familiarity through my space, I found myself watching him with a growing sense of gratitude and something else, something I had thought cancer had stolen from me along with my hair, my energy, my certainty about the future. Hope. Not just for survival, but for joy. For connection. For a life that was not merely endured but embraced, even with all its new limitations. Later, as the sun set over Silver Lake and David sat beside me on my balcony, his quiet presence more comforting than any words could be, I realized that my fight with my children had clarified something profound. This cancer journey was teaching me to distinguish between what mattered and what didn't, between genuine support and control disguised as care, between relationships that diminished me and those that helped me grow even as my body weakened. The battle for my autonomy wasn't over, with my children or with cancer itself. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt truly certain of my path forward. Whatever time I had left, whether months or years, would be lived with dignity, with agency, and with the courage to keep claiming my right to self-determination until the very end. September brought cooler temperatures to Lakewood, a gentle easing from summer's heat into autumn's golden light. The leaves around Silver Lake had begun their transformation, edges tinged with fiery reds and brilliant yellows. From my balcony, I watched the slow dance of the seasons, trying to find solace in nature's reliable rhythms as my own body continued its unpredictable journey. I was midway through my chemotherapy regimen now, 6 sessions completed, 6 more to go. Dr. Patel was cautiously optimistic about my progress. The latest scans showed the tumor had shrunk significantly, though not completely. "Your body is responding well to treatment," she told me during my last appointment, her warm smile genuinely encouraging. "Keep doing what you're doing." What I was doing felt mostly like enduring, weathering the cycles of nausea, fatigue, and pain that followed each treatment, then gradually regaining enough strength to function until the next one knocked me down again. Yet somehow, between these cycles of suffering, I was finding moments of unexpected joy, of genuine connection, of life being lived rather than merely survived. Much of this was due to the small community that had formed around me. Claire, of course, remained my steadfast advocate and cheerleader. David had become a constant presence, his calm reliability a counterbalance to the chaos of cancer. And to my cautious relief, Eric and Vanessa had maintained the truce established at our meeting with Diana, showing support without attempting to control. This fragile new balance was tested on a crisp afternoon in late September. I was seated at my dining table with David, reviewing options for a small garden on my balcony, something manageable even with my limited energy, when a knock at the door interrupted us. David went to answer it, returning moments later with Vanessa and my grandchildren in tow. "Mom!" Vanessa exclaimed, her voice too bright, too forced. "We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by." Her eyes darted between David and me, questions evident in her expression. "What a lovely surprise," I said, genuinely pleased. To see my grandchildren despite the awkwardness of the unexpected visit. 12-year-old Lily approached cautiously, eyeing my headscarf, a beautiful silk one Claire had given me, with evident curiosity. 9-year-old Noah hung back, half hiding behind his mother. "Grandma, you look different," Lily said, with the blunt honesty of a child. I smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "Yes, honey, I do. The medicine I'm taking for my illness made my hair fall out, but it will grow back once I'm better." "Does it hurt?" Noah asked, peering around Vanessa. "Sometimes," I answered honestly, "but I have good doctors and good friends helping me." I glanced at David, who had retreated to the kitchen to give us some privacy. "I'd like you to meet someone. This is my friend David. David, these are my grandchildren, Lily and Noah." David emerged with a warm smile, crouching down to the children's eye level. "I've heard so much about you both. Your grandmother says you're quite the artist, Lily. And Noah, I understand you're a champion chess player." The children beamed, at being remembered in such specific ways, their initial shyness melting away. Vanessa, however, remained tense, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Mom mentioned you were helping her with some gardening plans?" she said, gesturing to the plant catalogs spread across the table. "Just some ideas for container gardening on the balcony," David explained. "Something that won't require too much maintenance, but will give Eleanor a connection to growing things." "That's so thoughtful," Vanessa replied, her tone suggesting she found it perhaps a bit too thoughtful. "Mom's always loved gardening." "I miss my hydrangeas," I admitted. "But David's right. I need something more manageable now. Herbs, maybe some compact flowering plants." An awkward silence fell, broken only when Noah spotted David's sketchbook on the counter. "What's that?" he asked, pointing. "Designs for a birdhouse," David explained. "I make furniture and small woodworking projects. Would you like to see?" While David showed the children his sketches, Vanessa pulled me aside, her voice low. "You didn't tell me you were seeing someone." "I'm not seeing someone in the way you're implying," I replied, though in truth David and I had grown increasingly close. David is a good friend who's been tremendously supportive during my treatment. "A good friend who spends afternoons at your condo planting gardens?" Her skepticism was palpable. I felt a flash of irritation. "Vanessa, I'm 65 years old. I don't need to explain my friendships to my daughter." She had the grace to look chastened. "I'm sorry. You're right, it's a surprise, that's all." "Life is full of surprises lately," I said, softening my tone. "Not all of them unpleasant." Vanessa glanced over at David, who was now patiently showing Noah how to sketch a simple bird. "He seems nice," she conceded. "How did you meet?" "Through Claire. He lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago." I watched her expression carefully as I added, "He understands what I'm going through in a way few people can." Something shifted in Vanessa's face, a softening, a recognition. "That must Bernadette comforting." "It is," I agreed simply. The visit continued more comfortably after that initial tension. The children warmed to David quickly, especially when he promised to help them build their own birdhouses sometime. Vanessa gradually relaxed, even laughing genuinely when David told a story about a bear encounter during his park ranger days. When they left an hour later, Vanessa hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you have good people around you, Mom," she whispered. "I really am." After they'd gone, David and I returned to our garden plans, but I found myself distracted, turning over the interaction in my mind. "You're quiet," David observed. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about Vanessa's reaction to you," I replied honestly. It reminded me how much my illness has changed the dynamic with my children. They're having to see me as a complete person, with a life beyond just being their mother. It's uncomfortable for them. David considered this thoughtfully. "It's a necessary adjustment, though. You're not just a patient or a mother. You're Eleanor, a whole complex woman with needs and desires and a future still unfolding." His words warmed me deeply. In a world that increasingly wanted to define me by my illness, David consistently saw beyond it. "Thank you for that," I said softly, "for seeing me." He reached across the table to take my hand, his touch gentle. "But sure. I see you very clearly, Eleanor Johansson." The moment hung between us, charged with possibility. Then, with characteristic respect for my boundaries, David returned to discussing planter options for my balcony, leaving me to process the growing feelings between us at my own pace. The following week brought my 7th chemotherapy session. I had fallen into a rhythm with these now, the pre-medications, the slow drip of drugs, the immediate wooziness followed by the crash of side effects hours later. Claire accompanied me as usual, but this time, to my surprise, Eric also appeared at the oncology ward. "Hope you don't mind," he said, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant as he stood in the doorway of my treatment room. I took the morning off, thought maybe I could help out today. Claire raised an eyebrow at me, silently asking if I wanted her to intervene. I shook my head slightly. That's thoughtful, Eric. You can stay. For the next 3 hours, my son witnessed firsthand what chemotherapy entailed. Not the sanitized version he might have imagined, but the messy reality of it. He saw me vomit into a basin when a wave of nausea hit unexpectedly. He watched the nurses rush in when my blood pressure dropped suddenly. He heard my involuntary whimper when they had to reposition the IV in my increasingly difficult veins. Through it all, Eric remained steadfast. He didn't flinch or look away. He held the basin, wiped my brow with a cool cloth, and listened attentively when the nurses explained what was happening and why. I saw something shift in his understanding as the morning progressed, a dawning recognition of what I had been enduring privately all these months. When the session finally ended and I was cleared to go home, Eric insisted on driving me. Claire, sensing that this was an important moment between mother and son, gracefully bowed out, promising to check on me later. The drive to my condo was mostly silent. I was too drained to make conversation, and Eric seemed lost in thought. It wasn't until he had helped me inside and settled me on the couch that he finally spoke. I had no idea, he said, his voice thick with emotion. No idea what you've been going through. I managed a weak smile. It's not exactly something I wanted to showcase. But that's just it, he insisted, sitting on the coffee table to face me directly. You've been dealing with this alone, putting on a brave face for everyone. Even today, you were apologizing to the nurses when you got sick, as if your body's natural reaction to poison was somehow inconveniencing them. I hadn't realized he'd noticed that. Old habits, I murmured. Teachers learn to put others' needs first. Mom, Eric said, taking my hand, the one without the bandage from the IV site. I think I'm finally beginning to understand. When you moved, when you set up the trust, it wasn't about shutting us out. It was about maintaining your dignity. Through all of this. The insight surprised me, especially coming from Eric, who had been the most resistant to my decisions. Yes, I acknowledged. My dignity, my autonomy, my right to face this illness on my own terms. He nodded slowly. I saw how the nurses treated you, with such respect for your choices, your comfort, your privacy. They asked permission before doing anything. They explained options. They treated you as a partner in your treatment, not just a body to be processed. He paused, looking down at our joined hands. It made me realize that Vanessa and I haven't been doing the same. The admission, so honest and unexpected, brought tears to my eyes. That means a lot to hear. I'm sorry it took me this long, he said. I thought I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting myself. From having to truly face what you're going through, from having to acknowledge that you might not always be here, invincible and in charge. The conversation was draining. What little energy I had left after treatment. Eric must have noticed, because he gently tucked a blanket around me. You should rest. I'll stay if you want, or I can call David or Claire. Stay, I murmured, already drifting toward sleep. Just for a little while. When I woke hours later, the apartment was dim with evening shadows. Eric had drawn the curtains and left a small lamp on in the corner. I found a note on the coffee table. Didn't want to wake you. There's soup in the fridge. David dropped it by. Just heat it up when you're hungry. Call if you need anything. Love, Eric. The simple note, the consideration it represented, felt like a turning point. Perhaps the beginning of a new relationship with my son, one based on mutual respect rather than control versus resistance. The days following treatment were, as always, the worst. But this time something different happened. Both Eric and Vanessa checked in regularly, offering specific help rather than vague suggestions. Eric arranged for a cleaning service to come weekly. No strings attached, Mom. Just one less thing for you to worry about. Vanessa dropped off meals but didn't insist on staying if I was too tired for company. It was as if seeing me at my most vulnerable had finally made them understand that support didn't mean taking over. It meant reinforcing my ability to navigate cancer on my own terms. As I began to emerge from the worst of the side effects, another unexpected development occurred. Claire arrived one morning with a determined look that immediately made me suspicious. "Whatever you're planning, the answer is no," I said as I let her in. "I'm barely vertical today." "Which is precisely why you need this," she replied, producing a brochure from her purse. The Lakewood Cancer Center is hosting a Living with Cancer weekend retreat at Silver Pines Resort. Workshops, support groups, wellness activities, all designed for people at various stages of treatment. I eyed the glossy brochure skeptically. "Claire, I can barely make it through a shower without needing a nap. A weekend retreat sounds exhausting." "That's why it's perfect," she insisted. "Everything is designed for people with limited energy. You can participate in as much or as little as you want. There are quiet rooms for resting, massage therapists who specialize in oncology patients, nutritionists who understand chemo-affected appetites." Something in the description caught my attention despite my resistance. "It does sound well thought out," I admitted. "And," Claire added with a triumphant smile, "I've already signed us both up. David, too. He's coming as your support person." "You didn't," I groaned. "I absolutely did," she replied cheerfully. "It's next weekend." "The timing is perfect. You'll be in your recovery week, with maximum energy between treatments." Though I protested further, secretly I was intrigued. Since my diagnosis, I had deliberately avoided most cancer support activities, not wanting to be defined by my illness. But perhaps there was value in connecting with others who truly understood this journey. The retreat center was nestled in woods near the lake, its buildings designed to blend with the natural environment. Large windows everywhere brought nature inside, while accessible paths made even the outdoor areas manageable for those with limited mobility or energy. Upon arrival, we were given detailed schedules with color-coded options based on energy levels: green for active participants, yellow for moderate activity, and red for those needing maximum rest. The flexibility was reassuring. If I found myself overwhelmed, there were always quiet alternatives. "See?" Claire said as we settled into our adjacent rooms. "They get it." The first evening featured a welcome reception. Nothing elaborate, just simple refreshments and a chance to meet other participants. I was surprised by the diversity of the group. There were people of all ages, from a college student with leukemia to an elderly man with advanced prostate cancer. Some, like me, showed the visible signs of treatment: scarves covering bald heads, the telltale pallor of chemotherapy. Others appeared outwardly healthy, their battles hidden within. I found myself drawn to a small group gathered near the fireplace. A woman approximately my age was speaking animatedly, her bright purple headscarf accentuating rather than hiding her baldness. "The way I see it," she was saying, "cancer gives you a kind of terrible freedom. Once you've faced mortality head-on, a lot of the petty concerns that used to bog you down just fall away." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. I found myself nodding along, recognizing the truth in her words. "Eleanor," David said softly, appearing at my side with a cup of herbal tea. "Thought you might like this." I accepted the tea, gratefully, then impulsively introduced him to the group. "This is David, my—" I hesitated, suddenly unsure how to define our relationship. "Friend and chauffeur extraordinaire," he supplied smoothly, earning appreciative chuckles from the others. The purple-scarfed woman extended her hand. "Margaret," she introduced herself. "Ovarian cancer, third recurrence, currently in a clinical trial that's kicking my butt but keeping me alive. Her directness was refreshing. Most people in regular society tiptoed around cancer, afraid to ask direct questions or acknowledge the reality of it. Here, it seemed, such pretenses were unnecessary. "Eleanor?" I replied. "Kidney cancer, stage 2, halfway through chemo." "First-timer, huh?" Margaret said with a knowing smile. "Welcome to the club nobody wants to join." The conversation flowed easily after that. I found myself sharing experiences I hadn't voiced even to Claire or David. The strange dissociation from my own body, the way time seemed to distort during treatment, the unexpected grief over lost hair that had nothing to do with vanity and everything to do with identity. Others nodded in recognition, sometimes offering their own insights or coping strategies. No one tried to diminish my experiences with toxic positivity or platitudes about fighting cancer. Here, it was understood that some days survival meant simply enduring, breathing through pain, or finding humor in the absurdities of treatment. By the time the reception wound down, I was thoroughly exhausted, but also strangely energized. "Thank you," I said to Claire as we walked back to our rooms. "You were right about this." She squeezed my arm affectionately. "Told you so." The rest of the weekend unfolded in a gentle rhythm. Mornings offered wellness activities, gentle yoga, meditation, nutrition workshops. Afternoons featured support groups organized by cancer type, treatment stage, or specific challenges. Evenings brought more social activities, music therapy, art workshops, or simply quiet conversation by the fire. I found myself gravitating repeatedly toward Margaret and her straight-talking approach to cancer. During a workshop on managing treatment side effects, she leaned over to whisper, "The real trick they don't tell you? Baby shampoo for sensitive skin everywhere." And I do mean everywhere. Her practical tip, delivered with a conspiratorial wink, made me laugh out loud, something that had become rare since my diagnosis. Later, during a session on relationships during cancer, Margaret shared how her illness had revealed the true nature of many of her connections. My sister, who I always thought was the flaky one, turns out she's my rock. My best friend of 30 years, ghosted me the moment I started losing my hair. She shrugged philosophically. Cancer is like a relationship X-ray. Shows you what's solid and what's hollow. Her words resonated deeply with my experiences with Eric and Vanessa, with the surprising steadfastness of Claire and David, with the disappointing reactions of some friends I'd thought would be there for me. The most transformative moment came during an art therapy session on the second day. The facilitator, a gentle woman named Sonia, provided us with clay and simple tools. "Today," she explained, "we're not creating objects or trying to make something beautiful. We're simply exploring what our bodies are telling us." The instructions seemed vague, even a bit new agey for my taste. But as I began to work the clay between my palms, feeling its cool, responsive texture yielding to my touch, something shifted. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensations in my body, not just the familiar discomforts of treatment, but deeper messages I had been too busy enduring to truly hear. My hands began to shape the clay without conscious direction. I worked intuitively, pressing, smoothing, carving with my fingernails. When Sonia finally called time, I opened my eyes to find I had created a sort of vessel, irregular, with thin spots where the clay had nearly torn through, but still intact, still capable of holding something precious. "Would anyone like to share what emerged for them?" Sonia asked the group. Margaret, unsurprisingly, went first, displaying a fierce-looking spiked ball. "This is how I feel inside when doctors talk about me like I'm not in the room," she announced, earning knowing laughs from the group. When my turn came, I held up my imperfect vessel hesitantly. "I'm not sure what this means exactly," I admitted. Sonia looked at it thoughtfully. "What does it feel like to you?" I considered the fragile container in my hands. Like me, I suppose. Changed by this experience. Thinned in places to near breaking. But still. I searched for the right word. Whole, David suggested quietly from beside me. Still whole. Tears sprang unexpectedly to my eyes. Yes, still whole. That night, unable to sleep despite the day's exertions, I slipped out onto the small balcony of my room. The October air was crisp, the sky brilliant with stars. I wrapped myself in a blanket, breathing in the scent of pine trees and distant wood smoke. A soft knock at my door roused me from my contemplation. David stood there, looking concerned. Claire said she heard you moving around. Everything okay? Just restless, I explained. Too much on my mind. He nodded, understanding. Mind some company? I gestured to the balcony where I'd been sitting. David joined me, bringing an extra blanket which he draped carefully around my shoulders. For a while, we simply sat in companionable silence, watching our breath form small clouds in the cool air. I've been thinking about what you said today, he finally offered. About being still whole, despite everything. It surprised me, I admitted. I've been so focused on what cancer has taken from me. My energy, my hair, my sense of security about the future. I hadn't considered what remains intact. Which is the most essential part, David said. Your spirit, your wisdom, your capacity to find meaning even in suffering. He paused, seeming to gather courage. Your ability to love. The words hung between us, full of implication. I turned to study his face in the moonlight, the kindness in his eyes, the slight nervous set of his mouth. David, I began carefully, I don't know what the future holds for me. The cancer could go into remission, or it could progress. I could have years ahead or months. I know, he said simply. I lived that uncertainty with Maria. I understand what it means. And that doesn't deter you? I asked, voicing the fear that had kept me from acknowledging the growing feelings between us. He shook his head. Eleanor, when Maria was dying, she made me promise something. Not that I would never love again. She was too generous for that. She made me promise I wouldn't let fear keep me from living fully, whatever that meant. His hand found mine beneath the blanket. Meeting you, knowing you through this difficult time, it's shown me that there are still depths of life to be experienced, even in the shadow of illness. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. I think, I said slowly, that I'm learning the same lesson. When David leaned forward to kiss me, gently, almost reverently, it felt not like the beginning of something new, but like the recognition of something that had been quietly growing all along. A connection that cancer had made possible, not prevented. The rest of the weekend retreat passed in a blur of emotions, moments of profound connection with others who understood the cancer journey, quiet intervals of rest when fatigue overtook me, and through it all, a deepening awareness of the relationships sustaining me through this difficult time. By the time we returned to Lakewood Sunday evening, I felt fundamentally changed. Not cured, not free from cancer's grip, but somehow more authentic, more present in my own life despite its uncertainties. David helped me settle back into my condo, making sure I had everything I needed before reluctantly preparing to leave. At the door, he hesitated. Eleanor, I don't want to pressure you, but I'd like to be here more. Not just dropping by, but really being present with you through this. The old Eleanor might have hedged, might have worried about dependency or appearances, or whether it was sensible to deepen a relationship while seriously ill. But the woman who had faced her mortality, who had created an imperfect but whole vessel from clay, who had reclaimed her autonomy from well-meaning but controlling children, that woman knew what she wanted. Yes, I said simply, I'd like that too. The following day, I called Eric and Vanessa, asking them to come over that evening. It was time to share with them this new development in my life, this unexpected blossoming amid the harsh landscape of illness. They arrived together, expressions wary at my unexpected summons. I could tell they were bracing for bad news about my treatment or health. "It's nothing to worry about," I assured them as they settled on my couch. "In fact, it's something good. Something I wanted to share with you in person." I told them about the retreat, about the insights I'd gained there, and finally, about David, about how our friendship had evolved into something deeper, something meaningful that was enriching. My life even in the midst of cancer. Their reactions were mixed, as I'd expected. Eric seemed genuinely pleased, if a bit surprised. "You deserve happiness, Mom," he said, "especially now." Vanessa was more hesitant. "It seems fast," she said carefully. "You've only known him a few months." "When you're facing mortality, Vanessa, time takes on a different quality," I explained. "I don't have the luxury of waiting years to be sure. I have now, today. And today, David brings joy and companionship to my life." She nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I just don't want you to be hurt or taken advantage of." "I appreciate your concern," I said, reaching to take her hand. "But remember our agreement, supporting my decisions, even when you don't fully understand them." "I remember," she said, squeezing my hand. "And I am trying, Mom. It's just an adjustment, seeing you build a life that doesn't revolve around us anymore." "It's an adjustment for me too," I admitted. "But a necessary one. For all of us." As they were leaving, Eric hung back, letting Vanessa go ahead to the car. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "I want you to know. I get it now. What you did with the trust, moving here, all of it. It wasn't about shutting us out. It was about claiming your right to write the final chapters of your own story." His insight, so perfectly articulated, brought tears to my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "Exactly that." He hugged me, a genuine embrace without the awkward caution that had characterized our physical contact since my diagnosis. "I'm proud of you," he said fiercely, "and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." That night, alone in my condo overlooking the lake, I sat on my balcony watching the moon's reflection dance across the water. The air held the crisp promise of autumn, of change, of seasons turning as they always had and always would. My body was still ravaged by cancer and treatment, thin, tired, bearing the marks of my ongoing battle. But my spirit felt more alive than it had in years, perhaps decades. I had discovered, in the crucible of illness, not just who I was, but who I could still become, a woman of courage and conviction, worthy of respect, capable of love, determined to live whatever time remained with authenticity and purpose. The trust I had established to protect my assets had ultimately helped me reclaim something far more precious: my sense of self, my autonomy, my right to determine the course of my own life, even as disease threatened to take control. In standing firm against my children's well-meaning but misguided attempts to manage me, I had found strength I didn't know I possessed. And in that strength, paradoxically, I had discovered a new kind of vulnerability: the courage to open my heart to David, to embrace friendship with Claire, to forgive Eric and Vanessa for their mistakes while insisting they see me as I truly was. Cancer had not defined me. It had revealed me, to myself and to others. Whatever lay ahead, remission or progression, years or months, I would face it not as a victim, but as the author of my own story, the captain of my own ship, navigating difficult waters with hard-won wisdom and unexpected joy. Tomorrow would bring another treatment, another battle with nausea and fatigue, another round of uncertainty. But tonight, under the vast canopy of stars, I felt strangely at peace. Not because I knew what the future held, but because I had finally learned to hold the present moment with both hands, cherishing its imperfect wholeness despite everything. Winter came to Silver Lake with quiet beauty. Snow blanketed the landscape in pristine white, transforming my view into a monochrome painting occasionally punctuated by the bright red flash of cardinals visiting the feeders David had installed on my balcony. December brought with it not just holiday decorations throughout Lakewood, but also a significant milestone in my journey: my final chemotherapy session. Dr. Patel scheduled comprehensive scans for the week after treatment, cautioning that we shouldn't celebrate too soon. "The results will tell us where we stand," she explained, her manner professional but kind. "Then we can discuss next steps." Still, completing the full regimen felt like crossing a finish line I wasn't always sure I would reach. When the last drip of medication finished flowing into my veins, the oncology nurses surprised me with a small celebration, a certificate of completion, a fuzzy blanket emblazoned with "Cancer Warrior," and warm hugs from staff who had become familiar faces over the months. "You did it," Claire said, squeezing my hand as we left the hospital. 12 rounds. Not everyone makes it through the full course. "I had good support," I replied, glancing at David, who walked beside me, ever present and steadfast. The days following my final treatment brought the now familiar cycle of side effects, though somehow knowing they were the last made them marginally more bearable. David stayed at my condo most nights now, sleeping on the pull-out sofa despite my protests that he should use the guest bedroom. "I want to be able to hear you if you need anything," he insisted, and truthfully, his presence was a comfort during the long nights when nausea or pain kept me awake. Eric and Vanessa had settled into a new pattern with me as well. They visited regularly but respectfully, offering specific help rather than attempting to take control. Eric had become particularly attentive, often bringing work to do quietly, while I rested, simply being present without demands or expectations. Vanessa brought the grandchildren weekly, gradually helping them understand my illness in age-appropriate ways. Lily had even started a school project about cancer awareness, interviewing me about my experience with a maturity that made my heart swell with pride. The week before Christmas, I returned to Lakewood Memorial for my post-treatment scans. The cold efficiency of the machines contrasted sharply with the festive decorations adorning the hospital corridors. As I lay inside the CT scanner, the technician's cheerful, "Just breathe normally and hold still," seemed absurdly at odds with the weight of what these images would reveal about my future. Dr. Patel scheduled my results appointment for December 3rd, "a Christmas gift, hopefully," she said with cautious optimism. That evening, I found myself unusually reflective. David was at his cottage preparing for our Christmas celebration, giving me rare solitude. I sat on my balcony despite the cold, wrapped in layers of blankets, watching snowflakes drift lazily from the darkening sky. The past 6 months had transformed me in ways I was still discovering. Cancer had stripped away pretenses, false priorities, and the comfort of assumed tomorrows. In their place, it had given me clarity about what mattered, about who I was, about how I wanted to live whatever time remained to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My children's attempt to take control of my assets had led me to establish the trust that protected not just my financial independence but my very autonomy. That single decision had rippled outward, changing my relationship with Eric and Vanessa, opening me to new connections with Claire and David, and ultimately bringing me to this moment of quiet strength and hard-won wisdom. No matter what the scans showed, I realized I had already claimed the most important victory. I had faced mortality without surrendering my essential self. I had loved and been loved authentically, without the protective barriers I had maintained for so long. I had found voice to speak my truth, courage to set boundaries, and grace to forgive when those boundaries were respected. On the morning of my results appointment, I was surprised to find both Eric and Vanessa waiting in my condo lobby when I came downstairs. "What are you doing here?" I asked, touched by their presence. "Did you really think we'd let you and David face this alone?" Eric replied, giving me a careful hug. "We're family," Vanessa added simply. David arrived moments later, equally surprised but clearly moved by my children's gesture. The four of us drove to Lakewood Memorial together, a family constellation I couldn't have imagined 6 months earlier. In Dr. Patel's office, I held David's hand tightly as we waited for her to review the scans displayed on her computer screen. Eric and Vanessa sat just behind us, a supportive presence I could feel, even without turning to look at them. "Eleanor," Dr. Patel began, swiveling her chair to face us, "I'm pleased to tell you that the scans show no evidence of disease. The tumor has completely resolved." The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning penetrated my cautious hope. No evidence of disease was as close to the word cured as oncologists generally came. "The treatment worked?" I asked, needing confirmation of what I'd heard. Dr. Patel smiled warmly. "The treatment worked exceptionally well. Your body responded better than we could have hoped. Of course," she continued in her measured way, "we'll need regular follow-up scans every 3 months for the first year, then every 6 months after. Kidney cancer can recur, and we want to catch any changes early." "But for now?" David prompted. "For now, Eleanor is cancer-free," she confirmed. The relief that flooded through me was so profound it was almost painful. A physical sensation of tension releasing after months of constant vigilance. Behind me, I heard Vanessa's muffled sob and Eric's shaky exhale. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Dr. Patel's eyes crinkled with genuine pleasure. "You did all the hard work, Eleanor. I just prescribed the medications." She reviewed follow-up plans, recommended lifestyle adjustments, and reminded me that recovery from chemotherapy would take time. "Your body has been through a war," she explained. "Give it time to heal." Outside the hospital, standing in the weak December sunlight, my children embraced me properly, not the careful hugs they had been giving since my diagnosis, mindful of my fragility, but real embraces that spoke of their relief and joy. "Best Christmas present ever, Mom," Eric said, his voice husky with emotion. Vanessa couldn't speak at all, just held me tightly, her tears dampening my scarf. David stood slightly apart, giving us this moment together, but when I met his eyes over Vanessa's shoulder, the love and happiness I saw there made my heart swell. That evening, we gathered at my condo for an impromptu celebration. Claire arrived with champagne and sparkling cider, her jubilation filling the room with infectious energy. Eric brought his specialty lasagna, and Vanessa arrived with the children, and a homemade cake decorated with the words, "Congratulations, Grandma." As we sat around my dining table, a family expanded and reconfigured by crisis, stronger now for having weathered it together, I felt a profound gratitude that transcended the simple joy of good medical news. "I'd like to say something," I said, raising my glass of sparkling cider. Alcohol was still off limits as my body recovered. The table quieted, all eyes turning to me expectantly. 6 months ago, when I received my diagnosis, I couldn't have imagined this moment. Not just because I feared the cancer might take my life, but because I couldn't have pictured us here, together like this. I looked around at the faces I loved, some I had loved for decades, others who had become precious to me only recently. When I established that trust, it wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about claiming my right to face cancer on my own terms, with dignity and autonomy. At the time, it felt like I was drawing a line between myself and those I loved, especially you. I nodded toward Eric and Vanessa. But what I've come to understand is that true relationships, true family, can only exist when we see and respect each other as complete individuals. Vanessa wiped away a tear, nodding in understanding. Eric reached across the table to squeeze my hand. The trust protected my independence, yes. But more importantly, it forced us to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than dependence or control. And for that, as strange as it might sound, I'm grateful for what this journey has taught us all. I turned to David, whose steady presence had become my anchor through the storm of treatment. I'm grateful for new beginnings that I never expected. His eyes shone with emotion as he smiled back at me. And I'm grateful for second chances. I continued, the chance to live more authentically, to love more openly, and to appreciate each day as the gift it truly is. Claire raised her glass higher. To Eleanor, she declared, the strongest woman I know. To Mom, Eric and Vanessa echoed. To Eleanor, David said softly, his gaze holding mine with a promise of days to come. As we clinked glasses in celebration, I felt the fullness of the moment, not just relief at the medical reprieve I had been granted, but a deeper satisfaction at the life I had reclaimed in the midst of illness. The trust I had established to protect my assets had ultimately helped me discover treasure far more valuable: my voice, my agency, my authentic self. The cancer might one day return. That possibility would always hover at the edges of my consciousness. But it would never again find me passive or unprepared. I had learned to stand firm in my truth, to surround myself with those who respected my autonomy, and to embrace life's beauty even in its fragility. Outside my windows, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the glass to settle on the frozen lake below. Another season, another chance, another day to live fully and on my own terms. The most precious gift of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.